I think, really great movies. I've been to see, I think, like 11 or 12 in total this year. I've actually gone to see more. I've just been more busy than normal this year, which is why it's been fewer than my usual amount the past several years. However, I have noticed one thing this year, and I kind of noticed it last year too, but I feel like 2026 is really built on the momentum that 2025 set in terms of the films that we're getting, the kinds of films that we're getting, and the demographics of people, we could say, for lack of a better term, that have been actually going out to support these films. And before we get started, this is going to be a shorter live stream. I'm starting later at night because, like usual, I just had a lot to do. So I'm going to try to keep this like 25, 30 minutes max, and then I'll take any questions at the end if you guys are hanging out, wanting to chat for a. But first of all, I just want to talk about, is this the best year this decade for movies? And when I say that, I mean the 2020s. I don't mean like since 2016 or anything. I mean since 2020. Is this the best year that we've had for movies? And if you were to ask me that maybe 2 or 3 months ago, I would have said, I hope so. But now that we're halfway through the year, I know for a fact that this exactly is the best year for movies we've gotten. I mean, it could change. Look at the back half of the year, we get the Odyssey, we get Dune 3, Avengers, Spider-Man, and they all suck. Then I'm going to take back this entire video. But as of now, we've gotten some incredible films. And the thing is, these haven't just been incredible films. They've been original films, they've been franchise films. Thanks for joining, Antonios. Toy Story 5 has positive early views. They're saying it's one of the best Pixar movies in 20 years. Dude, you're 100% right. I'm going to get to that in just a second because that kind of leads into my second point here. But yeah, you're right. I've been hearing the early reviews for Toy Story 5, and they sound just as good as I could have hoped for. But yeah, just kind of moving along with, my question, is this the best year for movies so far, or this decade? I would say yes. And, just if we look at the first half of the year in terms of what we've gotten films like Michael, which I thought was absolutely amazing. I know not everybody loved that movie, but a good portion of the general audience that I know that went to go see that movie, especially me included, we walked out of that movie absolutely loving it. Jafar Jackson gave an amazing performance, and I've reviewed that film. I'm not going to go into detail here, but we've also gotten Hoppers, which was an original Pixar film. It didn't do amazing numbers, but I think it did a lot better than many of their other original films have recently. So I was glad to see that, and it was a really good movie. I didn't love it like some people did, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I do think it's one of Pixar's better films. I would say probably in the last like 7, 8 years, to be honest with you. And then you obviously got the two elephants in the room, Backrooms and Obsession. They've been taking the world by storm. I've seen both. I loved both. They're definitely in my top five of the year so far. Will they stay there? Who's to say? But as of now, they're definitely top five of the year for me. And of course, I would be remiss to not talk about my favorite film of the year still, and that would be Project Hail Mary. It's an absolute masterpiece, and I think it might be, and I'd have to think about this, but in terms of pure sci-fi, like space sci-fi, I might would say this is top 10 in terms of like a space sci-fi kind of movie. I might change my mind if I watch it a few more times, but as of now, just thinking on it, my love for the book, I know translated into my love for this film, but as of now, I would say Project Hail Mary could be a top 10 sci-fi film of all time. But all of that to say, that's what we've already gotten. And we're, like I said, we're barely halfway through this year. We still got Avengers Doomsday, that little film that I know not a lot of people heard about, so I feel like I should point that out. And what's releasing the same day as Doomsday? Little movie that maybe even more people haven't heard about, Dune Part 3. I would argue if Dune 3 sticks a landing, we could be looking at quite possibly one of the greatest trilogies of all time that could sit right up there with like Lord of the Rings, Back to the Future, Godfather, original Star Wars trilogy. If it's bad, then again, it might be something else that I take back. But as of now, where I sit, I think Dune has potential to be a top 10 greatest trilogy of all time. So those two movies, Doomsday and Dune Part 3, are coming out on the same day. Two absolute bangers. I know for a fact Doomsday's making $1 billion. I would guess Dune Part 3 will probably rest in like the $650 to $700 million range. It's not going to make Doomsday money, but Then again, who knows? Like the Doomsday hype could be the next Barbenheimer for all we know. We've also got, as you mentioned, Antonios, if you're still here, we got Toy Story 5, which I'm deliriously excited for. I'm going to try to go see it next week. I actually have a niece on the way, so she's due like literally any day now. So we'll see if I can squeeze that in and get you guys a review out sometime this week when I go see it with my mom. Also got Supergirl, Clayface, and in terms of original films, we've got The Odyssey, which I know isn't like wholly original. Oh, thank you, Antonios. I appreciate that, man. But yeah, we got like in terms of original films, we got The Odyssey, which I know isn't wholly original. I mean, it is based off the book by Homer. Like I think it was like BC or early AD, so it's like really old. It was like the quintessential or like the original version of like the hero's journey that we see so many stories from shows, movies, like books, etc. Like everything kind of stemmed from that. So it's not wholly original, but in terms of what Christopher Nolan's trying to do, and I've heard reports that he's using a new form of IMAX technology. So for me, that sounds really exciting. And just seeing a perfect blend, I would say, of both original films and franchise films and sequel films, and they've all been consistently solid. I mean, Scream 7 wasn't the biggest fan of it, but I didn't think it was a bad movie. Mario Galaxy, once again, not a great movie, but it's also one that I would say I enjoyed for what it was. I think I gave it like a 5.5 out of 10. Very average film, but I also see why there's people that love it. And it's also the year's first $1 billion film. So love it or hate it, I got to give it respect for that, if nothing else. And, not only do I think this has potential, or so far is shaping up to be the best year for movies, I think theaters would agree with me. I mean, AMC, I can't remember the exact number. You guys can go look it up. I believe it's like on Variety or Deadline or one of the major Hollywood outlets. Their numbers have reached pre pandemic levels. I mean, the Gen Z, and I know a lot of that was helped out by like Backrooms, Obsession, that's been doing amazing numbers. But Gen Z, my generation, and even Gen Alpha to a certain degree, they have been going out to the movies to support this. And that's what really gives me hope. That's what I love to see is I know Gen Z, a lot of us were like, oh, we're not going to the movies. My generation just wants to sit on the phones and, text friends on social media and all that. And there's certainly a truth to that. But I also think at least I'm going to speak from my experience being a Gen Zer. I'm at a point where I kind of just want to. I'm not going to do away with social media because obviously I'm sitting here talking to you guys on social media, but I've definitely been trying to limit my use on it. It just drains me mentally. I think a lot of my depression comes from this. So, not to get like really. Not to kind of go off topic here, I'm using this as a point. I think I love going to the movies because for me, that's kind of a break from all of the social media, internet drama, the politics, even just normal life events, all of that stuff. Like to me, going to the movies is truly an escape. And that's why I've fallen in love with film. That's why I've probably been a fan of film my entire life. I mean, when I was sad, even just as a little kid, I would want to put on like Toy Story or Cars. I mean, it's just movies have always impacted me in such a positive way. And I wish everybody could love movies the way I do. I know, this is just kind of my niche and other people have different niches and that's completely fine. But I say all of that to say, if I think other Gen Z are kind of in the same boat as I am. I think we just want to go have that communal experience. We want to go turn off our phones, sit down, watch a movie, get engrossed. And I know Backrooms definitely has a cult following kind of with the Gen Z crowd. I know the director is actually the same guy that did the YouTube stuff, I believe, the YouTube Backroom Shorts, which I still haven't seen. I went into that movie completely blind. I still got to check that out because I obviously love the Backrooms film, so naturally I want to see kind of where it all started and where he had progressed from, his first YouTube video to making his full-length feature film. But anyways, just the fact that people are going back to the movies, I don't know if this is just kind of a band-aid on a already major problem of theaters just not being able to be profitable anymore, but I'll take any win that I can get because, as I've said many times, if you guys know me personally, and I maybe even have said it here a few times as well, I don't want to live in a world where there's no cinema, where there's no going to a movie theater for that communal experience. And that's kind of just going back to what I already said. So for me, any good news with theaters is good news, in my opinion. And kind of just going off of that, that's going to lead me into my next question that I'm going to address here. Do I think that this is a new golden era for Hollywood? Now, if you were to definitive golden era of Hollywood is, I would say definitely probably like from the mid 70s through like the 90s. You could also argue like the 2000s, like especially like the early to mid 2000s was really great as well. Some classic me what I think classic films. But I would say in terms of like, the rise of some of the all-time greatest filmmakers like Spielberg, Tarantino, Martin Scorsese, and I'm a little biased because those are some of my favorite directors of all time. I know that. But I would say a lot of them started in the mid 70s through 90s, and a lot of them are still making movies today, which I think is great. Obviously, like Francis Ford Coppola. Hope I said his name right. You guys can correct me in the comments or roast me if I didn't. But, all that to say, all of these incredible filmmakers. I would say like that is by far the definitive golden age of Hollywood. But do I think we could be ushering in a new era of that? And, I understand that there's reasons to be afraid and reasons to fear the state of Hollywood and to not think that. There's obviously the big elephant in the room with the merger between Paramount and Warner Brothers. I made a live stream on that earlier and I have talked about it off and on as well. So I'm not going to get into all that. But, obviously you do have the merger kind of looming. You have the threat of AI, which you know, I, I don't even like to bring that up because it just really depresses me in terms of what the future of film could be decades from now. But again, I kind of want to keep this positive. This is a more positive live stream, so I'm just going to leave it at that. So obviously there are reasons to be afraid. There's reasons to kind of be nervous and anxious about what the next few decades are going to bring for cinema as a whole. However, I would argue that as of now, there's actually more reason to be hopeful. And, obviously kind of going back to Obsession and Backrooms, two incredible films came out. I think they came out like only a week apart from each other, but you've got these younger filmmakers that I think are like the same age, if not younger than I am, and they're paving the way for this more versatile, original filmmaking. They're making horror movies that don't feel derivative, that feel original, that feel unique, that feel like they speak to the modern audience, specifically Obsession. Like, Obsession is not a film that I'd go back and rewatch a lot, but I think it will easily end up in my top 10, if not top 5 of the year, just because I love the themes of that movie. And I'm going to get into some spoilers real quick, so I'm going to hold up my hand when I say this, just or finger, I guess. So you guys just mute the video, and then when I put my finger down, you are more than welcome to keep listening. But, just to talk about my thing with Obsessions, that movie had such a relevant theme because so many Gen Zers, even millennials can experience it. I mean, anybody can experience this, but I think it's more so just every generation from like millennials onward has kind of had to deal with this toxic environment of both boys and girls. Both genders do this for sure, where one just gets obsessed with the other person. One's craving love. One would do anything for love. And I think the beautiful thing about Obsession is that it doesn't show, if you watch that film, which if you're listening to me right now, I'm assuming you have, it really shows that you can't force love, that love is something that has to be mutual, that it's only going to hurt both parties the more you try to force love onto the other person and force them to care about you if they don't see you in that way. And I just think that movie was so relevant, and it spoke to, again, it was a younger person, a Gen Z dude making a movie for a Gen Z audience. And I mean, anybody can take stuff from this film, of course, but I just think it was so profound, and I really took something from that movie. So that's all I'm going to say for kind of the mild spoilerish details. I didn't go into as much spoilers as I thought I'd need to for that, but I just wanted to be safe. But it's these kind of films, and then obviously Backrooms had quite a bit of a cult following on the internet before it was made into a film, but it's still something original. I can't remember if it was the director of Obsession or Backrooms. One of them said that they didn't want to do any sort of franchise films. They wanted to focus on original filmmaking. I want to say it was the Backrooms director. I'm not entirely sure. If anyone knows in the comments, feel free to drop it down below and let me know. But, I think that's great. I think that it's great to see filmmakers kind of rise up and say, you know what, we don't really want to follow the Hollywood machine of just churning out subpar remakes, sequels, whatever. We want to actually go and make our own thing, and we're going to make them for low budgets, and it's going to turn out highly profitable because we're going to do it in a way where it's of high quality. You're going to get good word of mouth out, and people are going to go see it. And, unfortunately, just because you make a great film, I understand, doesn't necessarily mean the world is going to love it or that it's going to make money. Goodness knows there's plenty of films that I think really should have made a lot of money and gotten more recognition, but they completely flopped. I would say Masters of the Universe being a good example of that. But There is also, I think you will always make more money. The highest amount of money you can make, the better you make a film. I think that's just common knowledge, and I think most anybody would agree with me on that. And so, kind of just going off of, the fact that there's these younger filmmakers that really want to make low budget, high quality films, I would say even more so if you want to go into the Hollywood machine itself, a lot of the major Hollywood films, they're original films and they're actually gaining a lot of traction. I mean, Project Hail Mary, which, most people that saw that movie probably didn't even read the book. I'm sure a good portion did, but a lot of them just went in cold turkey. They probably heard again, kind of what I mentioned, the word of mouth. They saw the movie, they like the visuals. Ryan Gosling's one of the hottest actors in Hollywood at the moment, whatever the reason, but people actually showed up to go see it. And I think that speaks volume to the fact that people, yes, your Toy Stories are going to make money, your Zootopias are going to make money, your whatever, pick a sequel, and chances are, Devil Wears Prada 2. I haven't seen that film, but I know it's doing really well because it knew its target audience and it just leaned into that, which is great. It's just, not really a movie that appeals to me for probably obvious reasons. But, I say all of that to say that a lot of these films, while yes, the sequels may be making more money, it seems like even in the major Hollywood system that they're figuring out a way to kind of give creators these voices to kind of, hey, let's throw something out there, let's do something kind of original. And if it's not wholly original, let's actually adapt, for example, Project Hail Mary, a book into a film, and let's actually do it in a way that honors fans of the book while also gaining a new audience. And kind of same thing with Masters of the Universe. Like, I've only seen I think I said this in my review, like the Kevin Smith Netflix show. I liked it well enough, but I've just never been like the biggest He-Man fan in the world. I saw that movie and I absolutely loved it, knowing minimal knowledge outside of Skeletor, He-Man, and then kind of somewhat maybe the rest of the Masters of the Universe. And, when I watched that movie, it kind of made me want more He-Man. And so, like, just again, I think these Hollywood films are starting to find a really good balance of making movies that please fans or, of the source material or whatever, while also bringing in new fans. And I think that's kind of what's been missing in Hollywood. And kind of even going off of that, I mean, these movies, both, Backrooms, Obsession, and I keep going to these films just because there's such anomalies in the Hollywood world where you've got, again, these young directors making films. But I would even argue in the Hollywood machine, like with Michael or Project Hail Mary, they're gaining more traction and doing even better than a lot of the main franchise IP. I mean, Mandalorian and Grogu. I didn't think that movie was going to do deliriously well, but I also was like, I could see it making maybe like 500, 600 million max, just because kids love Mandalorian and Grogu. It's definitely one of their most popular IP, not just in Star Wars, but in general in the past several years. So I was like, I could see it flopping, but I could also see it maybe making just a small, minuscule profit. I never thought it was going to be $1 billion film or anything, but I certainly didn't expect it to be like, I don't even know if it's made 300 million yet, and it's like I think it's been out about a month or so, like 3 or 4 weeks, which, that's insane for a Star Wars movie. And I don't think it means Star Wars is dead. I don't think it means people won't turn out to major franchise films. Just, again, wait until Toy Story or Avengers or even Spider-Man for that matter comes out, and then tell me people aren't going to show up to sequels and stuff like that. But I do think we're finding a good balance where if the movie's good, people will turn out. If Project Hail Mary was bad, I don't think it would have made as much money because the word of mouth wouldn't have been as high. Same thing with, well, I'm not going to say same thing with Michael Jackson because everyone loves Michael Jackson. There are people that would have gone and seen that movie had it had a 0% RT score. So, truthfully, I don't think that really matters. But, just kind of all of that to say, I think Hollywood is really just starting to find a good balance between originals and sequels. I think they're finding a way to please fans. And at the end of the day, I think maybe one of the biggest things that I'm noticing in Hollywood is that they're returning to less of a modernized storytelling and more of a universal, broadly appealing storytelling with characters that we can all relate to. And I'm just going to kind of end it on this because this is something I didn't know if I wanted to include. I don't talk politics on my channel, so I'm not going to get into all of that. But I will say there has been a trend, and I think a lot of people have probably noticed this in a lot of Hollywood films, especially, your Marvels, your Star Wars and such, where it seems like they're really replacing the legendary characters with characters that are supposed to be relevant, cool. They're supposed to be 21st century. And, however you would define that, I'm not just talking about, race, gender, whatever. I just mean in general, they're trying to almost gimmick, the Gen Z, Gen Alpha kind of vibes. And I feel like in doing that, it kind of makes a lot of these films feel like, one second. Tonios, the more I think about it, the more I like The Mandalorian and Grogu. The problem is most critics wanted an in-game level Star Wars. That's not what it's supposed to be. Oh yeah, that's fair. I mean, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed The Mandalorian and Grogu. Like, it's not the Star Wars movie that I would go and put on at 11:30 at night on a Friday, which, in other words, I'm not going to watch it tonight. But, it is yeah, I can definitely see why fans like it and why critics didn't. Like, I see both sides of the aisle. I would definitely put it on par with Solo, more or less, where it's like a fun enough movie, but where, I don't think it's a top, like, three or four Star Wars film, or even top half for that matter. But yeah, I agree with you. Like, it's as Jeremy Johns would say. If you guys don't follow him, definitely go watch him. I grew up watching this man, one of my favorite movie critics. But as Jeremy Johns would say, it's a good time, no alcohol required. Perfect way to describe Mandalorian and Grogu. But yeah, just in terms of kind of going back to what I was saying with the storytelling, I feel like Hollywood has had this problem with a lot of their legacy sequels and such, where it just feels as though they're trying to gimmick the newer generation. They're using the slang. They're using a lot of the ideology that they think Gen Z and Gen Alpha should have, be it, religious, politics, whatever. And I just feel like in doing that, it's really, you're kind of selling the actual movie or show short. And what I mean by that is like, I'm trying to think of a good way to describe this that kind of keeps it broad enough. But I feel like when you make I'll put it this way. When you make something where it's like you have the central character saying things, doing things that only our generation would get, or that only people living in 2026 would get, then you're keeping it isolated to this demographic. And 20 years later, it's not going to have that same appeal that it would if you make a movie where, okay, yeah, maybe throw in some 2026 slang or this and that here and there. But if you keep these characters, their belief system, everything universal, if you keep them wanting, truth and justice, or fighting for what's right, or whatever it is, basically, if you keep that in perspective, then when everything is said and done, I think you're going to have the timeless stories that we've had, again, during the golden era, the true golden era of Hollywood, with Godfather. I mean, just keep things universal and don't try to appeal to a demographic that's going to grow up and outgrow all of this stuff, and then the next generation is going to be like, this stuff is so dated. You don't, the last thing you want, and movies have always had this problem, at least certain ones have, but don't date your movie. Just keep them broad and keep them universal. Definitely, it's okay to make movies every now and then that are geared toward, strictly Gen Z or Gen Alpha. And yes, it's fine to bring it down to our level, but don't just pander to us. And I think if Hollywood can just figure that out, which it seems like they're kind of starting to do. If you haven't seen Masters of the Universe, I won't spoil it, but they do a really good job of, I think, where the traditional version of masculinity, and this is kind of all I'll say about this, whereas the traditional version of masculinity is, the strong, powerful alpha male, and the kind of more Hollywood version of masculinity, at least in the past few years, has kind of been this more weaker, kind of more insecure, depressed kind of version of masculinity. And I think, I do think I'm one of those people that believe, I think masculinity has been held to such a high standard that I'll completely agree with people. And I don't want to get too much into this. This is kind of off topic, but I think it kind of goes back to my point with Hollywood, where I feel like with masculinity, like, I think there needs to be a balance between the alpha, gruff, tough dude versus somebody who maybe isn't afraid to express their emotions. Like, I think there is a balance. And I think in He-Man, they touch on masculinity in a way that I 110% believe was the perfect way to kind of balance that out. It didn't feel like they were, sissifying He-Man, so to speak, but what they were doing was they were making him vulnerable while also making him be tough, strong, and a protector when he needed to be. And so I think, if more Hollywood movies and shows, whatever, kind of can lean into that, can kind of show a more vulnerable yet masculine male characters, and, just I don't really want to get into the whole thing because I know a lot of stuff is like, well, how do you do a strong female character, and should there be strong female characters? And I think if Hollywood can find that balance, and I'm trying to think of maybe a more recent movie that's done this. There was one, I can't remember what it was that I saw, and it was maybe it's probably back in 2025. There was a movie I saw, and I can't remember what it was, but I was like, they found the perfect way to do a female character because okay, we'll use this example in Aliens with Ripley. Like, she's very kick butt. She can definitely hold her own. She's strong and independent, but she's also driven. That strong, independent nature of Ripley is driven because she is trying to, you know, protect this child. It's basically her maternal instincts driving her to be a protector. And I think that's a much better way to kind of show the different gender. Was it John Wick Ballerina? It might have been. It might have been. I do remember actually really thinking, hey, this is a good way to kind of do a female centric character. I don't know if it was the one I was focusing on, but that's a good example. Yeah, because like they kind of, well, I will say this for the way they did it in Ballerina, what I noticed in the fights is that it wasn't so much her overpowering, you know, the guy, girl, whoever it was she was fighting. It was a different fighting style than John Wick, but it was also within reason. Like she was using like her body weight to like kind of, you know, make the kind of wear the other guy out and kind of use that to her advantage. So I did think they did a really good job there. And then, you know, it wasn't like she just absolutely, you know, dominates John Wick and nearly kills him at the end of the movie. Like it was, you know, hey, she's really powerful and strong, yes, but John Wick is more powerful, and I think that's what a lot of people wanted to see. So yeah, that's a good example. We'll go with that. And so yeah, I mean, with Ballerina that came out, was it last year or the year before? It was within the past year or two for sure. But you know, I think with that film, and I think hopefully Hollywood is just starting to realize there's a way to do strong female characters, there's a way to do strong male characters without making one overpower the other or making one, you know, really powerful and aggressive and the other one just really weak and timid. I think there's a way to balance things out. And I think if Hollywood can figure that out at the end of the day, then I truly do think we're going to be in a new golden era of Hollywood. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got. I just kind of want to touch on this, kind of talk about where I think the state of Hollywood is at the moment and where it could be. I know we kind of went off topic there at the end. I was just trying to, you know, I didn't really know because again, I don't like to get political and I wasn't trying to. I was just trying to kind of explain what I think a lot of people's issues are in terms of the way certain genders are presented and kind of just the way to make, you know, these characters timely or timeless versus timely. But yeah, any questions? I'll take any questions, anything. Antonio says, I think the bigger issue was replacing the male characters with female characters versus 100%. I mean, absolutely. And, you know, there's definitely a few movies where they've done that, but it's also kind of worked. You know, I would say there's definitely a couple examples of that here and there, but by and large, yes, I agree. And I think that's all I'm going to say on the issue, I think. But I think the problem, okay, She Hulk being a good example. Like, you make a character like She Hulk, and I'll use the MCU for this kind of comparison here as a whole. But with She Hulk, you have her basically ranting to the Hulk, like, you don't understand how difficult my life is because I get catcalled as a woman. And I'm like, well, hold up. Didn't Bro, the Hulk, literally, like, say in the Avengers that he put a bullet in his mouth because he was so depressed and just, you know, he was so messed up in the head because of the stuff he was doing and the fact that he couldn't control this. But you get catcalled in the street, and for some reason, that's worse than what the Hulk went through. I mean, you know, it's stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, that stuff really bothers me. But then there's also female characters like, I would say Miss Marvel was a good example of a female character done well. And honestly, while I'm not the biggest Thor Love and Thunder fan in the world, this might be a hot take. I actually thought they did Jane Foster's female Thor, Lady Thor, whatever she's called. I actually thought they did her really well, and that's a hot take. I know I'm I'm expected to get roasted, but you know, well, like I said, the movie's quality is definitely up for debate. I thought they did a good I thought they did a good job with her character because yeah, she was kind of an equal to Thor in terms of power, but they made it to where she wasn't. I don't think she ever like actually saves Thor that I recall. It's been a couple years since I've seen that movie, but I don't think she ever like saves Thor. There's no prominent scene where she's like talking down to Thor and being like, you know, I'm better than you, etc., all of that. And from what I recall, it's like I think it was like in the comics too, where the more she used her power, the weaker she got. So it really came from a selfless nature in her rather than her just trying to compete with Thor. So yeah, I would compare, I think again, some have gotten it right, some have gotten it wrong, but I would say as a whole, yeah, I would much rather just in general, again, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, like in terms of original filmmaking, I would much rather just see new stories, new characters, rather than the same old, or seeing them try to appeal to certain audiences by inserting character A, B, and C and feeling like they have to elevate him or her above the established character everyone knows and loves. But yeah, let me see here. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything in the questions. Doesn't look like I did. So I think we got 3 people on here. If there's anything else, I'll hang on for just another minute or so, just see if anyone has any additional questions or whatnot before I head out for the night. Y'all can tell me, I guess the 3 that's on here, do y'all plan on going to see Toy Story next weekend? I think I'm going to try to go. No, I know my mom wants to go. I might try to go with her. What movie are you excited to see? No. Oh, okay. What movie are you excited to see that nobody's talking about coming out the second half of the year? Yes. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Very excited for Toy Story. What movie are you excited to see that nobody is talking about coming out the second half of this year? Trying to think of what all is coming out. Like I know the major films that no one's talking about. This is a tough one. If only I wasn't using my phone right now, I would look that up. I guess I would probably say, I'm going to say Godzilla minus zero. I mean, I think people that watch the first one, like, we like to think everyone has seen the movies we know and love, and that's cool and all, but Godzilla minus one, for some reason, like the people that saw it loved it, and it did make money. It was profitable, but it was also low budget and such. I don't hear too many people talking about Godzilla minus one, and naturally that means I don't hear a lot of people talking about Godzilla minus zero. So if there was one film that I'm excited to see that nobody's talking about, definitely Godzilla minus zero. That's kind of the first one that popped in my mind. I'd also say Super Troopers 3 because the first one is genuinely like probably tied with Norbit as my favorite comedy of all time. So I can't wait to see what they're going to do with the third one. Mine is The Death of Robin Hood. You know what? I think I finally watched that trailer like maybe a few days ago. I'd gone to see, maybe it was Obsession, I can't remember, but yeah, they showed the trailer for that, and dude, it looks really good. I mean, I've always kind of liked the twist. You can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but from the vibe I got from the trailer is kind of like the untold story, or almost like a different version, like it inverts the story of Robin Hood that we know. So that actually does seem really cool. I actually, and that, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the one Hugh Jackman plays Robin Hood. Is that correct? I want to say that's the same one I'm thinking of. Let's see. Maybe you may have left, but yeah, I want to say I'm pretty sure it's Hugh Jackman playing Robin Hood. Tell us about the parts they don't mention about Robin. Oh, okay, gotcha. And yes, it is Hugh Jackman. Okay, sweet. So yeah, that is the same one. Yeah, I think it's done by A24, which A24. I would say they, as a whole, they hit it out of the park more often than they don't. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be there for that as well. I don't know when it comes out, but I'll have to I'll have to keep that in the back of my mind and check it out for sure. But yeah, we're at the 33-minute mark, so we're kind of about where I wanted it to be, a half hour to 40 minutes. So we'll go ahead and next week. Okay, well, Death of Robin Hood and Toy Story double feature. That's absolutely not going to happen, but I'm definitely going to try some time to go and see Death of Robin Hood for sure. But yeah, okay, well, hey, I got a good one before I head out. The one that you talked about, a movie that is coming out no one's talking about, The Furious. Limited showtimes, but it's got a 100% RT rating. The people that have seen it are calling it like the new John Wick and one of the best action films of like the past 10 years. So yeah, I would say Godzilla minus zero or The Furious could definitely be either one of those is interchangeable for the movie that no one's talking about that I'm most excited for. But yeah, just kind of want to throw that out there. Go see The Furious. I'm going to try to go catch it at some time next week. But yeah, that's going to do it for today, guys. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share for those of you watching this in the future. And I will catch all of you guys later.